right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
I've been pretty hard on Trump and the MAGA people lately, much to the chagrin of a lot of people who still believe in Donald Trump. And I understand it's hard to let go, and that the main reason a lot of people still like Trump isn't because he in particular is all that great, but because the people you also hate are driven absolutely insane by him. I really, truly get that. But when I say things like Trump was a failure, what I mean is that he failed to do what politicians are supposed to do, which is translate their stated promises into action. Now, translating into action means not only the things that you introduce before Congress, but also hiring the right people to run the government and make policy on the day-to-day basis. Instead, Trump was mostly interested in tweeting or Jeff Sessions and outsourced mostly policy making to free trade globalists like Gary Cohn or his son-in-law Jared Kushner, neocons like John Bolton. Now, I can't stand any of those people, but unlike Trump, they're competent. They were actually pretty good at holding Trump off from doing anything that he said he wanted to do, and in many cases, they did the exact opposite. And because Trump did not really care enough about policy, he would just shrug and say, oh, well, I guess I hired them. Or, hey, Jared is my son-in-law, so I guess that's MAGA too. In other words, MAGA is pretty much whatever Trump says it is. And if you want absolute proof of that, take a look at this. It's the largest so-called Trump-aligned think tank that is launched this week, in an immense testament to GRIFT in Washington, D.C., and the meaningless nature of so much of his actual legacy. It's called the America First Institute, and its mission is, quote, perpetuating former President Trump's populist policies from Axios. That group raised $20 million for its first year. Wow, cool, right? Finally a populist think tank. There's just one little problem. Guess who is running this thing? It's Brooke Rollins. She was a close associate of Jared Kushner in the White House. She ran his domestic policy council. She is a former Rick Perry aide, probably more akin to a Texas libertarian, caught Jared Kushner's eye, and on this, she could smell a great opportunity to make money and be a power player here in D.C. If you want to know how much of a joke this organization is, I only have to tell you who the vice chairman of the Institute is. Fox Business anchor Larry freaking Kudlow. That's right, Mr. Wall Street. Tax cuts are always the answer. Trickle down is actually good. Is the guy in charge of this so-called populist think tank. Kudlow is joined by other luminaries of the Trump presidency. Axios reports that America First Institute's board chair is Linda McMahon of pro wrestling fame. Rick Perry is going to run their Center for Energy Independence. In other words, the new America First policy sounds a lot like the old American GOP policy, the same people of decades ago. Just listen to how they present themselves. It's amazing.
We know what the insider approach is. It's failure. It's the outsider approach that wins, and we saw it firsthand. We're working to save the soul of this country, and the America First Policy Institute will be the heart of that effort. We are beholden to no one but the American people, but we can't do it alone.
I got it. The outsider approach is what we need. That's why we have a bunch of longtime GOP stalwarts running the joint and beholden to no one, and that's very rich. This is already the largest so-called pro-Trump think tank to launch since the end of his presidency, and they got $20 million. But that's not even enough. Rollins told Axios they hope to raise a total of $40 million next year. That would put them on par literally with some of the biggest think tanks in Washington. Given how completely Trump abandoned most of his populist promises in the 2020 campaign, I'm not really that surprised that this is what it all turned into. But in a way, you almost have to respect the chutzpah of people who are fully beholden to the old agenda, just slapping America First on the sign and raising millions of dollars. Here's the thing. It's probably going to work. They all work for Trump, after all. Who am I to say who is really America First or not? The only person who decides is Trump. It's his movement. That's precisely why this is all so ridiculous. Trump is probably the best thing that ever happened to the pro-corporate wing of the Republican Party. What they realized early on is that so much of their base is there just for the culture war. And as long as he continues to drive people crazy, they can mouth the words America First while doing the largest corporate tax giveaway in history. And, by and large, not doing all that much to actually deliver for working Americans while in office. So if it worked once, why mess with the formula? Why not turn this into the new brand? That's all this is. It's a branding exercise to cover for continuity of the same policy. I'll end with this. Any so-called populist think tank that has this guy at the helm of it probably is a con.
when you look at $2 trillion, you just ask yourself, how many zeros are there in a trillion? And you have to go 12 zeros to get trillion. It's a huge amount of money. Everyone talks about being in favor of this. The polls right now are in favor of it. Frankly, I'm looking at the polls after it's been in place and you've had a crash in the market or something like that. Then see how many people like the huge indebtedness that the U.S. is going to be in. What a good administration should do is balance things out. I think we still have $1 trillion left over, Larry, from the stimulus package before. I mean, something on the order of that level. $2 trillion is just way too much. We've gone from a debt level of 84% of GDP now to 115% of GDP, and it's continuing to rise. I think this does not make sense. Anything on health care, that makes a lot of sense. It does to me. Anything for jobs creation, that would be good. But that's a lot less than even $1 trillion. That would be a small amount compared to the $2 trillion. I think it's a killer of the long-run economy of the U.S.
Anyone who values Art Laffer's opinion and brings him on, that was his first show, by the way. That was the very first thing that he did there on the air. So thank you, Larry, for bringing us that content. Anyone who is doing that and is vice chair of some sort of populist think tank, I'm going to go ahead and say this is bullshit. I don't know what else to say.
I think your most important line in all of that is that Trump was the best thing that ever happened to the corporate wing of the GOP.
I think so.
You're right.
I believe that.
He rescued them, right? I mean, their ideology was rejected.
Dead.
They had zero energy, zero grassroots support for what they were pushing, and he gave them an out. And that's the contradiction of Trump, is part of what people loved about him is that he made people that they hate lose their mind. Yeah. Like, that was the best thing about Trump. Media people losing their mind, elite Democrats who look down their nose. Incredibly satisfying. But you have to realize that while they were crying and rending their garments and clutching their pearls, they were also gaining more and more and more power, money, control, a pass in terms of what they were actually doing. Because on the one side, if you just glom onto Trump and are like, yeah, with him, but I'm going to still keep, lowering corporate taxes and doing the corporate thing, they got rich. The people over here could just be like, I'm against Trump. And that's all they had to do to get rich and get power and get famous and consolidate control. So while it may have been fun to watch them performatively freak out, the reality is he was the best thing going for all of them.
Oh, he was great. And it's funny, I just read this piece about corporate CEOs like snickering when they're like, yeah, Mitch McConnell's going to come after us.
Yeah,
like, come on.
Right.
Man. Yeah, they're like,
dude took more money from us than anyone else.
It's not even that they think
he's going to be a real threat.
It's not even that they think they own him or whatever, even though they definitely do. They're like, he's not going to do anything.
Of course he's not.
What are these people going to do? And that's the whole point. They're like, it's a joke, right? And they know, they're like, oh yeah, they're going to talk a big game. Everybody's going to get Fox, blah, blah, blah.
Put on a press release,
they're like, at the end of the day, he's going to cut my taxes. If you are Business Roundtable right now, right? Who's going to the mat for you? The entire GOP Republican caucus. Everybody, every single one of them is going to vote to make sure the corporate tax rate remains as low as humanly possible, even though it doesn't even really matter. And okay, so who's working on your behalf? Ask every single one. I would love to see every single person on the America First Institute board. Ask them, every single one of them, ask them, do you support a corporate tax rate raise? Single one. Ask them and go look at what they were saying about tariffs 5 years ago, right before Trump was there. Every single person there. What do you think Linda McMahon and all these other people think and believe and push while they were in office, while they were working for Trump? Brooke Rollins, her major accomplishment on the Trump administration was criminal justice reform. And maybe you support that, but that's a liberal policy. That's not anything in terms of Republican, populist, or anything like that. And so, once again, it gets completely revealed for what this entire thing is. This is a money-making exercise.
Yeah.
These people are about to become the new Brookings Institute of the right.
Or the new Lincoln Project, for that matter.
They're going to be more successful. These are much more competent people than the Lincoln Project. And hopefully they don't have any pedophiles in their ranks. But,
right.
Like,
and this is a long-term play, too.
This is
new establishment
20 million, then you go to 40 million. Next thing you got 100 million. You got a nice new building here on K Street. You got some free lunch. I'm talking about one place in particular. Great lunch, by the way. And I do hope to be wined and dined there at some point. But look, the whole thing is ridiculous. And it just goes to show you that you can get away with this. Even in the Axios piece, Mike Allen, he just takes this at face value. He's like, oh, they're going to continue populist policy. I'm like, Larry Kudlow is their vice chairman.
Tell me one populist policy
At least just put in just one thing about being like, eyebrows raised at the idea of Larry Kudlow being involved. But everybody in D.C. doesn't even think that way. They don't think about policy. So they're going to get away with this for a long time. I'm sure the space will be very nice. So congratulations to everybody involved. You're making a lot of money.
Coming up, Don Calloway and Emily Jashinsky are here for Team Rising when Rising returns.